On this edition of SciTech Now, find out how one professor is putting science on a collision course with art. We explore the place on Earth with its sights on Mars. Learn how an unusual creature may save our shorelines. Discover how 3D printing is reshaping the engineering landscape. And we investigate the future of the digital age. Coming up next on SciTech Now. Hello, I'm Simon Perez, and this is SciTech Now, our weekly program bringing you the latest breakthroughs in science, technology, and innovation here in Central New York and across the country. Let's get started. We begin by tackling the complex topic of molecular biology. To break it down, we head to the University of Michigan, where one professor is simplifying the way we look at science in an unconventional way, through dance and music.
Imagine that I'm in the cell here, and here's part of the cell, and it's an important part. I use this.
Autophagy is a process in which our cells break down parts of themselves.
As with anything, including furniture, parts of the cell wear out. So how does the cell get rid of these things that are no longer functional? And this is the process of autophagy.
Almost every month, there's a new connection being discovered between autophagy and some aspect of human health and disease. Cancer, some types of neurodegeneration, diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, various muscle diseases, you name it. That means we have to really understand it if we want to be able to manipulate it for therapeutic purposes.
Products F and H are synthesized through the action of enzymes 1 through 7.
I've been teaching introductory biology for over 20 years, and I'm looking for ways to make this subject accessible. And one of the questions I asked was whether short videos or including art would help.
David does pretty much everything to, I see, an exact scale.
I had been aware of the paintings of David Goodsell for a number of years. I'd always admired his work, which shows a more realistic depiction of how a cell might be than we typically draw them.
Dan contacted me 10 years ago now and wanted to do a painting about autophagy.
At that time, he was not interested because we didn't know enough about the system.
The data just wasn't there. But now there's a lot more data at all levels for structures, for concentrations. We corresponded for months talking about the science behind it. The illustrations I do actually is working in a very interesting scale level, which is intermediate between anything we can see experimentally. But you can only get down so fine with that because of the size of light waves. Each time he gets a new discovery in his science, he comes to me asking for a new painting. So it's real fun to see his research progressing and helping him document that.
The minute I saw that you've emailed through the composers list, I thought, wow, I've always been wanting to do something like that for a long time.
The next evolution of this was to go to Wendy Lee and ask if there was any way she would be willing to collaborate on a musical piece that would represent autophagy.
There's one point in the piece that the hand motion has to be like this.
I want to see that.
Yeah. I was so excited about this because I had always wanted to collaborate with scientists, but I just didn't have the right occasion to do that. How does one section move to the other, or are the proportions equal, or is there a climax or something? Or
anytime I'm working with someone who doesn't know the field well, in particular an artist, they ask questions that make me look at autophagy in a slightly different way. Wendy asking me about the speed of certain parts of the process, which I had not thought about, but she needed to know with regard to the tempo of the music.
I hadn't appreciated as much in that sense of being a climax, but it's clear that as it gets to that point, and then all of a sudden it does change, and this boom, 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 boom. And
we've done paintings, we've done the music. I had thought that a natural progression would in fact be to do dance. And some of the people that I was talking to said, well, Peter Sparling, a professor of dance, is in our building.
He played me Wendy's music, he showed me Dave's illustrations, and then he explained to me what autophagy was. And a red flag went up, and I thought, I don't want to have dancers mimicking what cells do.
So I took directly from your Scientific American article those 6 major processes
I hit upon some common denominators as Dan started describing the process, as if they were animated, as if they had wills of their own, and I thought, aha, this is it. This is a hook.
Curl up, surround and engulf, seal, cut through, break down, and release back.
It was fascinating to hear Peter's interpretation of autophagy.
Does it mean that there is less energy or more resistance? Less energy of the organism to motivate itself through a space, or more resistance? So we're kind of playing around with the illusion that dancers can create.
He was asking questions and explaining how he was thinking about the process in ways that I had never imagined. But now we had to truly put it down on paper, as it were.
What you have done is to provide me a script that can have multiple interpretations. I read a narrative into it. My role is largely as production director. I put the visual images and the music and the dance together.
So what I'd like to do now is to show Dan and the folks what it is we're going to film up at the video studio on the floor from above. Okay, so can we do that first?
I asked Wendy if she would sit at the piano and play macromusophagy. That then brought together the work that Wendy originally made, inspired by the cellular process, with the dance that I made, inspired by the same thing. And then stop right there, gals. I think that's where it would end in this version. Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. That's amazing.
We had never seen any aspect of the dance before. After it was over and we were walking back, we were discussing, what did Peter mean by this part? Why were there these dancers in red high-heeled shoes, for example? Since it is not absolutely literal and not absolutely obvious what's being depicted at every step of the video, it fosters discussion.
For the video version, we were able to go into the Duderstadt video studio and shoot against green screen, and then remove their bodies against Dave's beautiful medical illustrations. It's as if the bodies are within a cell, and it becomes like animation.
The cell carries out a dance of spring cleaning 365 days a year.
As someone who's a neuroscience major, this is something very different than anything I've ever seen.
I think it would be most helpful in a teaching environment for non-science students or people that aren't really well-versed in science.
Scientists are finally becoming aware of the fact that they need to do a better job of explaining what they do to the public at large. Funding is becoming tighter, more difficult to obtain. And the only way to possibly reverse that is to get more people to become supportive of basic research.
Kliansky was in the running for a Nobel Prize in 2013 based on this research. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory is managed by scientists at the California Institute of Technology. They've been making strides in space exploration since the 1930s. Let's go inside the lab that has sent spacecraft to Mars and beyond.
No, this isn't a glitzy, space-aged movie set you're looking at, although it probably could double as one. This actually is Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Spacecraft Assembly Facility, or clean room as it's often referred to. It was built back in 1961, in part to support NASA's Ranger and Mariner missions to the Moon, Venus, and Mars. The room is used to assemble and test spacecraft in a clean environment necessary for space missions. And some of the scientists you see here, covered in their smocks, are working on 2 NASA projects vital to the future of climate and weather tracking, among other things. The first project is called SMAP, Soil, Moisture, Active, Passive. SMAP is a NASA Earth satellite mission that will map Earth's land surface soil moisture and detect winter freezing and spring thawing. This will help scientists better understand Earth's water, carbon, and energy cycles. The mission is going to combine frequent global measurements from advanced radar and radiometer instruments, eventually creating what JPL says will be the most accurate and highest resolution global maps of soil moisture ever obtained.
So this will be an Earth orbiting mission. It'll orbit over the North and South Pole about once every 100 minutes. So as the satellite orbits around the Earth is spinning underneath it. So every time the satellite orbits, it acquires a swath of soil moisture data. The Earth orbits a bit more, rotates a bit more, satellite acquires another swath of data. So that way, in a very short amount of time, 2 or 3 days, we can cover the entire globe.
The question is, what could be so important about understanding of all things soil moisture? Well, lots of things, vital information that we need to know. For example, the SMAP-produced global maps will help scientists track water availability around our planet. That could ultimately guide policy decisions key to human health, agricultural and economic productivity, and ecosystem functioning. SMAP also improves the accuracy of short-term weather forecasts and long-term projections of climate change, because variations in soil moisture can influence our weather by affecting things like the formation of clouds and rainfall or intense dry spells. JPL says SMAP will also enable scientists to monitor droughts and floods, whereby mitigating the related impacts on our lives. And equally important, understanding exact measurements of soil moisture can contribute to early warning information on crop yields, which are so important across the country.
What we're doing today at JPL in the clean room is we're assembling the SMAP observatory. So we're just now starting to put all the assemblies and subsystems together, build up the observatory, go through very rigorous testing to be ready for launch from Vandenberg.
Meanwhile, there's another major project underway here in the clean room. It's known as the ISS RapidSCAT, an experimental mission developed by JPL in cooperation with the International Space Station program.
It's an instrument that measures the winds all over the ocean every day. And there are 2 parts to it that are important to the public. The first one is, if you want to warn about hurricanes that are far away, if you want to affect shipping, if you want to see how hurricanes are approaching the United States, there's really no way to do it using airplanes. We need spaceborne instruments. The impact will be in our weather forecasting, and it also will give us invaluable new information about how the tropics work. The tropics are one of the great areas where a lot of the climate is modulated.
With RapidSCAT's tracking of storms and hurricanes, the mission will also provide the first near-global observations of daily variations in ocean winds. The instrument will be docked at the International Space Station and installed on a site there using the station's robotic arm.
We get the data very quickly and turn it around, process and turn it around, send it to the operational agency. So that's NOAA in the United States, ECMWF in Europe, and they take that data, put it into the weather models and get better forecasts. We also give it to specialized centers like the National Hurricane Center, and their forecasters can actually take a look at the images and issue warnings based on our data.
A movie set? Maybe not. Yet there sure seems to be some work going on here reminiscent of a sci-fi feature film.
The Jet Propulsion Lab has launched more than 100 missions into outer space. From the Puget Sound in Washington State to the shores of Lake Michigan to the Florida coastline, across the country, states are coming up with all kinds of strategies to fight the effects of climate change. Reporter Rick Carr has the story of one city that's experimenting with an unusual creature in hopes of protecting its shoreline.
Just before 7 a.m. on a summer morning is pretty much the perfect time to get out into the water and gather some oysters.
If there's any oysters, they kind of occur in these groups. We call them clumps.
These oysters are not for dinner. They came from the mouth of the Bronx River, where it flows into the East River. They're for science. Allison Fitzgerald from the environmental group New York, New Jersey Baykeeper says she and other marine biologists have been interested in these oysters for about a decade.
Back in 2004, the Parks Department started to notice, as you see here on the tires and stuff, all these natural oysters here. We didn't put any of these here, they just happened to be here.
Even with all the pollutants in the water and all of the sewage overflows that go into the water when there's a big rainstorm, right in the shadow of LaGuardia Airport and Hunts Point Market, the scientists wanted to find out how they're surviving here and to see whether it was possible to get more of them to survive. Fitzgerald and a group of volunteers came out to check the artificial oyster beds environmental groups set up last year and find out how many of the baby oysters that had been planted had survived and reproduced. The theory is that if an oyster bed can make it here at the mouth of the Bronx River, it can make it anywhere. And the waters around New York could use more oysters.
Oysters are able to filter the water, so if there's any particulates in it, they will remove that. They're also able to harbor pollutants.
Oysters also clump together when a bed thrives. And Fitzgerald says that's the key to restoring the marine environment.
So they build up this like 3D reef, like a coral reef, and then the fishies swim through, and the worms and the crabs, and everybody creates this whole healthy ecosystem that if the oyster reef wasn't here, it would just be a vast mud flat, which a lot of things can't grow on.
This is one of several projects aimed at bringing more oysters to the metro area. But even the most ambitious one, which hopes to plant 1 billion of them in and around New York Bay, won't come close to restoring how many used to be here.
New York was thought to be the oyster capital of the world. There were 350 square miles of oyster reefs, and up to 6 billion, maybe even 9 billion oysters were in the harbor.
Emily Driscoll is a documentarian whose film Shell Shocked looks at efforts to bring oysters back to New York. She says a thriving population of oysters could help New York's shoreline.
We saw what happened during Hurricane Sandy. We're susceptible to floodings. Oyster reefs can diminish some of that wave energy.
Is that a horseshoe crab? Yeah.
The volunteers in the Bronx included a couple of architects from Scape, the firm that's planning an artificial oyster reef along the shore of Staten Island. Allison Fitzgerald of New York, New Jersey Baykeeper says the project at the mouth of the Bronx River gives volunteers an opportunity to feel connected to the water that surrounds most of the city.
I love the idea of having all these college students and volunteers come out here and showing them why I'm so excited to be here. This is like get in the water, get the waders on, see what the actual reef looks like, work alongside the actual scientists, and get out here and do some good work.
Fitzgerald says we'll never be able to fully restore the waters around New York to the way they were when there were billions of oysters in them. But it'll be a step in the right direction if more New Yorkers come down to the water for a perspective on how the urban environment fits into the natural one.
You're right by Hunts Point, you're right by LaGuardia, you're right by Rikers Island, you're in the South Bronx. And it's beautiful. There's egrets on the shore, there's crabs out there, there's oysters, there's mud. It's a great place to be.
According to a new report by the Nature Conservancy, oyster beds are among the world's most endangered marine habitats. More than 85% of the world's oyster reefs are gone. Additive manufacturing is more commonly known as 3D printing. It's been around since the 1980s. But in the past 10 years, it's become a popular and affordable technology with broad applications, from creating simple toys to complex artificial limbs. Reporter Jenna Flanagan takes us inside a groundbreaking 3D lab.
There's a combination of both the design and the artistry that can really come from either the art side or the engineering side, as well as a lot of technical issues because of all the equipment that's being used and the software for designing these objects.
Professor Dan Friedman helped put together the 3D printing lab with hardware from the Brooklyn-based startup MakerBot. He also runs the related manufacturing center out of it. As the lab was being developed for the engineering department, he realized the engineering and computer science students were just as interested in design, and many of the fine art students were also technically sophisticated.
I get a lot of surprised looks when I say we're putting together programs between the two schools, because everyone seems to think that engineering and art are very separate worlds, but they really aren't. And probably the first person to really apply this in the business world was really Steve Jobs.
SUNY New Paltz's 3D printing lab isn't just about making stuff with this newfangled technology, although everyone in the class does plenty of that.
The face over there was actually produced on the MakerBot using an iPhone. So there's actually an app that'll scan your face.
Oh,
and then
that's actually somebody's face.
That's my face. It's hard to tell, but I had to take the glasses off for it to work, but you know.
Oh, of course, there we go. If you look past the Dr. Seuss-like designs and plastic tchotchkes, proponents of this lab say we're witnessing the beginnings of a manufacturing revolution. Bree Pettis is MakerBot's founder and CEO. His company aims to make 3D printers as accessible to everyone as the personal computer. In addition to donating the 25 3D printers that make up the lab, his company was partnered with grant money through the Hudson Valley Economic Development Corporation, Hudson River Ventures, and the electric company Central Hudson to make it a reality.
Okay, here we go. When you have a MakerBot, you think differently. Instead of thinking, where am I going to go buy this? You think, oh, I could make that.
It's much more cost effective to design something on a computer because it's easily modified and changed And our customers are very demanding, and they never give you one design and say, this is what I want, can you do this? You do the design that they give you, and then they make half a dozen changes after that.
Picky as that may sound, it's pretty standard for the high-end jewelry business. 3D printing has been around for over 30 years, but affordable only to government contractors and big business. It's only the past 10 years that mid-sized companies like Quality Casting have been able to embrace the technology. Morfino says for them, 3D printing has increased their productivity, not only in volume, but in their ability to customize using lost wax casting.
In this case, this is the final product of the print that had come out of the machine. Okay, and each one of these is a file that has been sent through email, downloaded into the machine, and printed out.
Machines like the one MakerBot produces print largely in a thick plastic filament called PLA and produce noticeable layers of lines. That's not detailed enough for what Quality Casting needs for its jewelry. When a customer sends a design, the files are uploaded to a computer, checked, and then sent to the printer. Two types of wax are used to build a model. The white wax supports the model and gets dissolved away, leaving the blue wax. When it's put into a plaster mold, the blue wax is heated and then disintegrates. Once the plaster is cooled, molten precious metals are poured into the mold, creating the exact piece specified by the customer. Back in the MakerBot lab at SUNY New Paltz, Professor Friedman is also hoping the printers will help shape the manufacturing revolution.
The possibilities are pretty broad. I mean, it can either be all the way from sort of making custom or semi-custom simple things like cell phone cases, or all the way up to doing semi-custom builds for like the electronics industry.
Students currently enrolled in SUNY's 3D print courses will earn a certificate of completion. Friedman hopes to elevate that to a full-blown minor and one day a major.
Affordable 3D printers are being developed across the country. The cheapest go for less than $500. The United States is becoming a Wi-Fi nation. Cities across the country, from Seattle to Houston to Miami, are all going wireless. The idea is to boost productivity, attract more business, and make sure everyone has access to the internet. More than 250 cities have begun work to create public internet hotspots. Reporter Rick Carr takes us to the streets of New York City to show just what it takes to get an entire city online.
Reliable internet service isn't a luxury when you're looking for a job. Jason Holloway says it's a necessity.
I go on my job search engines and I just check for job openings. I also check my resume, make sure my resume's looking good, up to par.
That isn't so easy for residents of public housing, Holloway says, like him.
Because there's no internet access as far as in my home or around here. A lot of these families are single mothers, so they're trying to feed a family, and it's pretty tough for the cable to stay on when you have mouths to feed.
It's easier to get online when one of the Housing Authority's Wi-Fi vans comes to his complex. Residents can use its wireless signal to get online, or one of the computers in its mobile lab. But it only shows up for one day every other week. In a speech to a technology conference earlier this year, Mayor de Blasio said the city needs to do better.
We must have universal, affordable, high-speed internet access throughout this city. It's as simple as that.
The mayor put his senior counsel, Maya Wiley, in charge of bringing better and cheaper internet service to New York.
We need more competition. We need more alternatives to how infrastructure gets built and delivered. We need to leverage every asset we have, including the cities. So it's public assets as well as private. It's public and private partnerships.
The assets the city leveraged first were payphones. The Bloomberg administration ran a pilot program that offered free Wi-Fi at around 20 public phones. Then it asked tech visionaries to dream up a payphone of the future. Earlier this year, the de Blasio administration asked private sector firms to submit proposals for making that dream a reality throughout the city by installing 7,500 new public phones that also provide free wireless internet service.
85 feet, hopefully, around each payphone site. So you're literally creating wireless hotspots that are free. It benefits business, it benefits competition, and it benefits the public.
The new phones will make more of the city like the Columbia University campus. Its open Wi-Fi network lets anyone get online while soaking up rays.
Here you go, Mr. Mitchell.
It let us make a video call to Christopher Mitchell, whose Minneapolis nonprofit advises cities on how to improve internet access. He thinks free Wi-Fi is the right first step.
Low-income people and especially minority populations really depend on mobile devices. So having Wi-Fi that they can use when they're on the go is going to be a good way of keeping their costs down. But you're not going to see kids writing term papers on mobile devices, or at least it would be nice if they didn't have to. They'll need better options in time.
Public housing resident Jason Holloway says free wireless internet at payphones will make a difference.
Oh man, it would be great for the community.
The city expects the first new payphones with internet hotspots to be up and running before the end of the year.
The United States has nearly 200,000 wireless hotspots, more than any country in the world. That's it for this edition of SciTech Now. For more information on science, technology, and innovation, visit our website at wcny.org/SciTechNow. And you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Next week on SciTech Now, drones are taking flight all across America. See what they're seeing. A closer look at the battle against a determined invader taking place right here in New York. We'll have a little fun with the multi-billion-dollar gaming industry. We go underground to see what's threatening the water you drink and learn about a life-saving technology most of us use every day. I'm Simon Perez. We'll see you next week on SciTech Now.